All right, friends. We are continuing with Yogananda's biography, The Salient Qualities of Paramhansa Yogananda. This is Monday, and this is the day I remind you that this effort on my part to help spread the teachings of Swamiji and of Master is dependent upon your support. You have been wonderfully generous in your support, and I think we're going to be able to do some great things together. Right now, we're still in this COVID, so this is what everything looks like broadcasts, and we'll just keep doing them as long as this is our world. And then after that, we'll see what Divine Mother has in mind. So you can support through Patreon, which is an ongoing support, which also brings a few perks with it, a couple of special monthly broadcasts that are just for the Patreon folks. It's a website you can go on, you can find it easily. You can donate directly through PayPal, and you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is pretty painless. And the higher the numbers are there, the more something good happens. I'm not quite sure what it is, but somebody knows. So, with deep gratitude from me for your faith in the work that we're doing, and great celebration for all of us that we have the opportunity to serve in this way. So let's pray together. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Master, Paramhansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, friend and guide Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. Help us to attune ourselves to your living presence, that everything we do will bring greater light into this world. Help us to ask the question every day, every hour, Lord, how can I serve you? Help us to hear your response, and then to respond with joyous enthusiasm, courage, and dedication to every whisper of guidance we receive. Om, peace. Amen. So we are up to out of 32 qualities of Master. And of course, our focus is to live like Master, not merely to admire him. So we're up to number 16. And Swami writes, always, Master was very much the leader. Wherever he went, something about him commanded respect. This fact was clearly evident, of course, in the demeanor of the thugs who menaced him during his early years. It wasn't that he was always being threatened by thugs, but there were a few experiences in his early years where he encountered real criminal types and who were trying to extort money from him or in other ways threaten him. And Master had so much inner power that he just stood up to them and they ran away from him, or even more, repented and confessed how unhappy they were because of their terrible lifestyle. Master never lifted a finger. Sometimes he raised his voice, but he commanded their respect because of his inner magnetism. So it says this fact was clearly evident, of course, in the demeanor of the thugs who menaced him during his early years, but he always emanated a quiet aura of authority. One woman in the Hollywood church congregation told me that when she first saw the Master, it was through a restaurant window. Suddenly then she tugged at her husband's sleeve. Look, dear, through that window. That has to be the most spiritual man I've ever seen. He was always and quite naturally in control of every situation. Wherever he went, people deferred to him. Speaking for myself, though I loved him deeply, I always held him in deep awe. So, this is, Master was not a very tall man. a 6'5", 5'6", 5'7", something like that. He was robust, and he actually had great physical strength, as he demonstrated on more than one occasion. I believe that's in this book, but there's a story told about him wanting to show people the power of the energization exercises and what you can do with your willpower. And I think he was in Chicago, and he was on the stage, the lecture platform, and he invited 5 or 6 strong men to come up on the stage and try to exert their physical strength over him. And so he stood up against the wall, and he had these 5 or 6, and for some reason I always think of it as, quote, burly policemen. Maybe that's the way the story was told. And they tried to hold him against the wall. And Master made no visible action, but literally just flexed the muscles of his stomach, and they all fell over backwards. There was another, I believe, where Master balanced with his heels on the edge of a chair, which is to say just his feet and just the top of his head on another chair. So he was stretched out in between, and nobody could make him bend. Nobody could knock him off the chairs, even though he seemed precariously balanced. He just had that kind of power within him. He had this tremendous amount of physical strength. So that was always in him. But when you see pictures of him, he doesn't look like a physical person. He doesn't strut around with that kind of energy. As I said, he was robust. He didn't look frail. But the power that he had was, well, it comes from many levels. Of course, you can say it was because of his attunement with the infinite source of power. But even just bringing it down more in a human way, Master was not in conflict with himself. You know, what we all have the same potential for energy and for strength and for willpower that Master had. But what happens with most of us is that our energy is going simultaneously in multiple directions. In other words, well, on the deepest level, we have a lot of vrittis in our spine. We have these whirlpools of unfinished karma, and a great deal of our energy, consciously and subconsciously, is circling around the things I want and I don't want. You know, that I have and I don't have, that I'm happy about, that I'm sad about. And if we just honestly look at our own nature, we see that it's one force is canceling out the other almost constantly. The closer we get to self-realization, because it's directional, it's progressive, it's not nothing and then everything, the more all of our energy flows in one direction. This was and the less doubt we have about our ability to go forward, the more faith we have in the power of God flowing through us. So Master rested in a way that we can articulate in a human way that we can work toward. If we don't already have it in our hands, it's something that we can work toward. And what we're working toward is resting with complete confidence in the presence of God and in the certainty that, seek and ye shall find, knock and the door shall be opened. Just call upon that willpower, and that willpower will be there for us. In other words, Master commanded respect because Master was in command of himself. And he wasn't being tossed about by emotional desires and so on. He was in command of himself. And if we think about what dissipates magnetism, what causes us difficulty in life, it's always because we ourselves, in one way or another, sort of slip away from the direct line that we're trying to go to. So Master, in his teachings, in the practice of Kriya Yoga, in the practice of the energization exercises, in meditation itself, in prayer and discipleship, what we are developing is the ability to have a one-pointed focus and to draw energy at will. The energization exercises, from the point of us of developing inner magnetism, which is what we're talking about today, which Master had, It was because energy was always, energy was always responsive to his will. The energization exercises which Master taught are his unique contribution to the science of yoga. Yoga postures have existed for thousands of years. Nobody even knows when yoga postures first began. Kriya, the actual technique of Kriya Yoga, Master said, comes from ancient times, that many other masters have taught their disciples Kriya, or as he said, something very much like it, because it's fundamental to our nature to be able, once we go into the state of inner awakening, the landscape is always the same. There's the chakras, there's the vrittis, there's the kundalini energy, there's the ida, the pingala, the sushumna, the spiritual eye. These are not created by anyone. This is Sanatan Dharma. This is that which is. But energization exercises was something Master intuited and created for us at this time, because we are moving from the age of matter into the age of energy. And so the energization exercises essentially cross over that line from matter to energy, because we use the physical body, which is a factor of the material world, but we use the physical body to access the inner energy self. And so the energization exercises, which if you don't know them, you can contact Ananda anywhere and learn them very easily. It's a 12-minute, takes about 12 minutes to do them. And what we're doing is we're training the willpower to direct energy through the physical body, but the physical body is the vehicle for training the willpower. It's just like when you go to the gym and you lift the heavy bars and you work on the machines and you put the weights. The weights are the means for challenging the muscles. And of course, willpower is involved too, but we make a physical change in the muscles by using those weights. So with the energization exercises, we make a notable change in our ability to draw energy at will. And the physical body is the equivalent of the iron weights. We use the physical body to practice, but what develops is the willpower. And so what happens when we begin to develop that kind of willpower, first of all, as Swami writes, Master was always in control of himself, and he was always in control of any situation. Now, we have to understand that didn't mean that Master would walk in and take over. He wasn't in control of it in the sense that he always ran the show and made people do what he wanted to do. But he was in control of it because he emanated such powerful magnetism. And of course, Master had previous incarnations when he incarnated as a king and as a general, as William the Conqueror, and when he was Ferdinand III. And he spent his whole life in war, and he was never injured. He was a big man in the Spanish incarnation when he was Ferdinand III. 26 years he was in war. And he rode at the head of his army, and he was never injured. It was just like the force field that he exerted was so strong that even physical objects, I presume, were turned aside by it. But when you are in the company of a great leader, it's like you're automatically uplifted and inspired to go forward. I worked with Swami Kriyananda a lot at different times, and on a couple of occasions, I worked with him to do some sort of public thing. We made an effort to incorporate Ananda as a California city, and that was in 1981. And in 1975 into 76, we did a political movement in order to create some changes in the planning department in Nevada County, because the planning director was not competent. She'd been promoted from a secretary, and she wasn't competent to deal with what we needed in order to develop our community. And Swami saw that the only hope was to get her fired. And so we started a political movement, which resulted in her being relieved of her position and liberated Ananda to develop. But in that, oh, it was not war, of course, but it was politics and public hearings and petitions and standing in front of councils and all that sort of thing. And it was an experience for me of just faith in Swamiji's leadership. He was very confident. He had the power. He knew what he was doing. I didn't know what we were doing. I was following instructions, but I felt very comfortable, just like a soldier under a competent commander. You just feel like you can go ahead and do it. And you can feel like success will be yours because of the magnetism he's putting forth. And when Swami said there was something about Master that commanded respect in every situation, it was not because he demanded respect. It was because he just walked in and was the master of himself. And he emanated, of course, faith in God. He was one with God. He emanated this sense of confidence in the outcome. He also emanated this extraordinary power of love, this deeply held concern for every human being. I mean, this is the source of the respect he commanded. You can have someone who can frighten you a little bit because he has a lot of power over you. I mean, there are many people who have a certain kind of magnetism, and you respect them because you fear them. And then you behave in a certain way because you don't know how this being is going to exercise power over you. And if you know they have power, you can be very, very afraid. This is brutal kind of leadership. And it demands respect, commanding it. Now, of course, I'm just playing with words, but commanding respect means that there was something in him that caused everyone to sit up straight and take notice. And then Swami tells that story of a woman who became a disciple of Master, but she was magnetized because she just saw him walking. And she saw him walking, and something in him commanded her respect. But the respect that was automatically came out of her because she was sensitive to it was that he's the most spiritual person I've ever met. Now, how could she feel that? I mean, she knew it, and it was true, but she felt it because that was the aura that was coming off of Master. And that's not something that you can create by technique. You see, it's actually what we emanate. Who am I inside? What am I doing with my thoughts, with my feelings, with my attitudes? You know, people want to be important. They want to be respected. They want to sort of be known for whatever it is that they're able to accomplish. But so often people approach that from the outside. I wear the right clothes. I hold myself in a certain way. I have these words. I cultivate, this particular mannerisms like that. And we try to paste it all on from the outside. And if people aren't very sensitive, you can fool them for a while. But where Master's power came from was his inner consciousness. And so that's why when he was tested, like in the stories that were told, when he was confronted, in one talk that he gave during the Depression years in America, Master stood up in a public lecture and he named names about people who were taking advantage of the situation and hurting their, brothers and sisters in God by their greedy actions. And afterwards, Master was back, I suppose, in the dressing room or something behind in the theater where he was speaking. And a man burst in and threw a gun down on the table and said, "I was paid to kill you, but I can't do it. I just can't do it." Because something in Master's magnetism made the man want to love and not to hate. Want to feel joy and not to feel sadness. And the man says, "You've ruined my life. This is my livelihood, and now I can't do it anymore." Because Master's magnetism went into him and changed, literally rearranged the molecules of his own energy. You see, this is what a master is able to do. When I talked about we're not in command of ourselves because our energy is going in all different directions, when you take an unmagnetized piece of metal and put it against a magnet, the molecules in the unmagnetized bar align, and then it's changed into a magnet. The reason that we're not magnetic is because our energy is going in every which direction. And the practice of Kriya, where we consciously run energy through the chakras, the practice of energization, where we learn to draw energy through the medulla and have energy at will, right attitude, prayer, music, chanting, all of japa, the repetition of simple mantras, all of these things continually make a groove in our consciousness. Nowadays, people are talking about neural pathways. My friend Joseph Selby Purushottama will be publishing a book next year about neural pathways and about how meditation changes us. This is a physiological explanation of the way the energy flows within us. Whatever we habitually do with our energy, that's the magnetism that we develop. Now, the good news about that means that if we want to develop the kind of inner magnetism that Master had, we need to do the things that Master did and do the things that Master taught. What I was going to say about the magnetism being who we actually are. So when Master is confronted with someone who wants to kill him, confronted with somebody who has profound evil intentions, Master is not afraid. He's just not afraid. Because what is there to fear? The only thing that you can take from me is my body. When certain criminals were trying to demand money from Master, first he gave them a little money and they just kept demanding more. And finally, actually there were several encounters, but one of them was that one where they kept demanding more until Master finally raised his voice and just told him to get out and go away. And there was so much power in that, the criminal just ran away. In another one, a criminal demanded money from Master. I guess he had quite a few of these encounters, although Master said no one crossed his path except that it was Divine Mother's will. So for each of these, they were perhaps like the robbers who were crucified with Christ. They had bad karma, and then they had very, very, very good karma to be in the company of a Master. But Master said, I can give you my money. He said, but I have a treasure that is worth much more than money. And then he gave the criminals a little touch of his own inner bliss, and then in that state of bliss, every other consideration just seems completely meaningless. But Master's, the power in Master that commanded respect was because of who he was. And he became a Master step by step, just as you and I are doing. There's a story that Swami tells in the Path of a devotee where Master was urging some strong action upon one of his monks. And the young man just kept saying, well, Master, of course you can do it because you're a Master. And then Master, in a very loud voice, responded, and what do you think made me a Master? He said, it was by doing. And that is a very powerful statement because, you see, a very important part of Sanatana Dharma is that who Master is who he became by following the very same instructions that he is now giving to us, and by walking the very same path that we are now walking. I love to think about the fact that Master himself at one point had the exact equivalent of my consciousness. That he knows exactly what I'm thinking, why I'm thinking it, what I'm feeling, what my impulses are, and not because of theoretical, but because he walked through it. He wasn't me. Every individual is divinely commissioned by God, and even the lowest atom is dowered with individuality, is how Master put it. Each of our journeys is unique because I am a jiva created by God. I am my own drop of the infinite. But my state of consciousness, the vibration of my consciousness, is universal. And I'm just moving from darkness to light, And every shade of shadow and light that I'm passing through, Master passed through. So his sympathy and the practical nature of his advice is based on experience. Yes, I was there. I stood there. I remember. And if you follow these actions, then you will become like me. What do you think made me a master? So when we see the manifested form of perfection, or we hear of it, or we see it in our with intuitive vision, or reading Autobiography of a Yogi and holding the book and looking into the photograph of Master, and again intuitively receiving what that vibration of consciousness is, it's a promise. It's not a repudiation of who we are. It's a promise of who we will become. And so we begin to practice. We begin to practice making our strength because of our inner magnetism, and as much as possible, making our confidence in that strength because of our awareness of the divine within us, our awareness of Master's response within us, our awareness, as it says in Autobiography, if we even say the name of Babaji with devotion, then we will attract an instant blessing. Of our awareness that I am putting one foot in front of the other in the very footprints that Master walked in. And then, when we're tempted to seek outer ways of strengthening ourselves, that we resist that temptation to go for the superficial and settle deeply into the inner power that we're building within ourselves. Because everything else in this world just goes away. You can have all the accoutrements you want of power, prestige, position, wealth, and then there will be the moment. There'll be the moment when you die. Because I've been present watching a number of people die in my life, I'm very conscious of how that process unfolds and how everything just goes away and you're just reduced. You're just reduced essentially to an unresponsive body that breathes for a while and then stops breathing. And then as soon as it stops, what you're wearing, your jewelry, the house you're in, the people who love you, none of that is there. But what is there and is still perceivable is the vibration of consciousness that is our real definition. So Master had refined that vibration of consciousness that he commanded respect. I love that phrase. Swamiji writes about it, that even as much as he loved Master, he said the aura of power, of divine magnetism that emanated from him always kept Swamiji, he said, a little bit in awe. He actually said only when he met Anandamoyi Ma 10 years after, not 10 years after, 6 years after Master died, he said with Anandamoyi Ma, he was able to relax and be her little child in a way. He said that as much as he loved Master, the sense of awe was always so great that there was nothing else he could do. He talked about meditating once in the monks' retreat at 29 Palms. And he said he was meditating and he suddenly felt this extraordinary energy just shooting up his spine and this great spiritual light opening in front of him. He opened his eyes and he looked out the window and he saw that Master was just walking by. And Swami said he slipped out of the house and went to where Master was and just touched his feet in gratitude because that power was always there. Now Swami said to Master, when you are gone, will you be as much with us then as you are now? Master said, to those who think me near, I will be near, meaning those who call me with their heart and with their thoughts, I will instantly come to them. God bless you.